Good evening, New York, and the rest of our listeners around the globe. My name is June Stoyer, and I'm the host of the Organic View Radio Show. Our podcast is available on iTunes, Zune, and you can also visit our website, which is www.theorganicview.com. If you have any questions or would like to connect with us, you can simply post a question on our wall on Facebook, send a tweet to @theorganicview, or contact me directly at June Stoyer on Twitter. If you'd like to be on the show or would like to find out about sponsorship opportunities, please contact us at questions@theorganicview.com. This evening's show is brought to you by Eden Foods, the most trusted name in certified organic clean food. Shop online at edenfoods.com and enter the coupon code ORGVIEW, that's ORGVIEW, when prompted during checkout to receive 20% off any regularly priced items, excluding cases. For other promotional offers, please visit theorganicview.com's website.
On tonight's show, two bee advocates, Tiffany Finck-Haynes and Larissa Walker, will join me to talk about the importance of honeybees as it pertains to food security and what people can do to save our bees. My first guest is Tiffany Finck-Haynes, the head of the beeaction.org campaign for Friends of the Earth. So I'd like to welcome to the show Tiffany Finck-Haynes. Good evening, Tiffany, and thank you for joining us.
Hi, June. Thanks for having me on the show.
You're very welcome. And also joining us tonight is Larissa Walker, the Pollinator Campaign Director and a policy analyst at the Center for Food Safety. Good evening, Larissa.
Good evening, June. Great to be here.
So great to have you.
Before we begin, I would just like to clarify that I will be addressing Larissa and Tiffany individually with the questions that I would like to ask so that there's no confusion as to who is speaking.
But before we begin, if you could just take a moment, and I'll begin with Tiffany, could you talk a little bit about what Friends of the Earth does as well as what your campaign is about?
Sure. Friends of the Earth is an environmental organization. We've been around since 1969, and we champion a healthy and just world. And our beeaction.org campaign works to protect bees and other essential pollinators that are in decline globally.
Thank you. And Larissa, could you share with our listeners what you do for the Center for Food Safety?
Sure. So Center for Food Safety is a national nonprofit organization, and we work to protect human health and the environment from the harmful food production technologies of industrial agriculture. And one of those areas that we work on is pollinators. So we do a lot of work focusing on pollinators and pesticides and protecting those critical species from the impacts of our industrial agriculture system.
Fantastic. Thank you.
For my first question, I'd like to begin with Tiffany.
Could you please explain to the listeners a little bit about the history of neonicotinoids?
Sure, absolutely. So neonicotinoids are one of the most widely used class of insecticides in the world. They're manufactured by Bayer and Syngenta, and they're implicated as one of the key factors in recent bee declines. A growing body of science has been finding that they're really contributing to this rapid decline of pollinators. Just recently, there was a big meta-study that was released analyzing over 800 peer-reviewed studies, and it was released by the Task Force on Systemic Pesticides, which is a group of global independent scientists, and confirms that neonics for short for neonicotinoids, are a key factor in bee declines and are harming beneficial organisms essential to functional ecosystems and food production. We find neonicotinoids on over 140 crops in the U.S. and also for cosmetic use in gardens. They can last in the soil and in our water and the environment for years at a time, and it's in smaller doses for several months.
I'd like to take a moment to encourage our listeners to read a book called A Disaster in the Making, which was written by Dutch toxicologist Dr. Henk Tennekies, who was actually the whistleblower who discovered the impact of neonicotinoids on our pollinators. It's a book that is very eye-opening. I highly recommend that if you are going to read it, you do share it with friends, family, and especially with your kids. There is a link to Dr. Tenneke's website as well as to the numerous interviews that he's done on the show. So please visit our site, www.theorganicview.com, for more information.
Larissa, can you take a moment and talk about what some of the food security issues are as it pertains to the pollinator decline?
Sure. Pollinator declines, such as honeybee declines that we've been seeing recently, are a really serious issue, and not just in the United States, but also around the world. And so over the past decade or so, where we've seen this alarming loss of a variety of pollinating species, everything from bees to birds and butterflies, and as Tiffany mentioned, other beneficial insects, it really puts a strain on our food system. Pollinators are critical to our food supply, and researchers estimate that 1 in every 3 bites of food we eat comes from a crop pollinated by honeybees alone, and they're only one of thousands of pollinator species. In the United States and North America, there are about 4,000 native pollinator species, and so many of our favorite fruits and vegetables and nuts depend on pollination services from these species. Everything from apples to almonds and cherries and cucumbers and berries and squash, the list goes on and on. But really, without these species, our plates would be a lot less colorful and our diets would not be as healthy. And also, there's a larger impact beyond just the food system in terms of our environmental and ecosystem health. And that's why I think you'll hear a lot of folks refer to honeybees as an indicator species. So we should be concerned not just for our food security, but also for our environmental well-being.
Thank you. Larissa, do you know what the economic value is?
Yeah.
As far as food?
Yes. So in the United States, it's estimated that pollinators, both honeybees and wild bee species, contribute anything from $20 to $30 billion to the U.S. Agricultural economy annually. And honeybees alone, it's estimated they contribute about $15 billion to the economy. Globally, it's estimated that about 87 of the leading 115 food crops we have are dependent upon pollination services. So, again, these species are just absolutely critical to our food system.
Thank you. Tiffany, can you share with our listeners about your efforts working with the White House on a new initiative?
Absolutely. So, in June, President Obama announced a new federal task force which is co-chaired by the EPA and USDA to promote the health of honeybees and other pollinators. And it is going to emphasize public education, additional research, and habitat expansion. And while these are important elements, it isn't clear how the task force will address pesticide exposure. So in order to secure real protections for bees and stop a potential second silent spring, Friends of the Earth and some of our allies are calling for the White House to really take meaningful action on these pesticides. So in honor of National Honeybee Day, which is coming up very soon, this Saturday, August 16th, we're asking that people across the country write a letter to their editor of their local newspaper urging the President's task force to address the threats of bee-harming pesticides. And it's really important that folks across the country really help shape the public debate for our policymakers. We can't let the Bayer, Syngenta, Monsanto's, and other chemical companies in the pesticide industry, which are the manufacturers of these pesticides, continue to manufacture doubt about science and fool politicians to delay action on neonicotinoids. What we need is for the Obama administration to act now to ban these pesticides, to protect our environment and our agricultural economy. So we really need people voicing their opinion on this to really get the attention of the policymakers. Something else that Friends of the Earth is doing is we're calling on the First Lady, Michelle Obama, to make the White House garden and grounds truly bee-friendly by banning these pesticides from the White House garden and grounds, and using her influence as First Lady to encourage the EPA and Congress to take immediate action.
Thank you. Larissa, the Center for Food Safety has been victorious numerous times, but more recently you have a success that regards the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that is extremely important. Could you share with our listeners what the news is?
Sure. So Center for Food Safety has had a long-standing history with legal actions focusing on really protecting national wildlife refuges from the harms of industrial agriculture. And this follows a decade-long action that we've been involved with that federal agency and the Fish and Wildlife Service. But most recently, just several weeks ago, in July of 2014, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service announced that they will be phasing out the use of neonicotinoids and eventually ban them from all national wildlife refuges by January 2016. So it was an extremely significant development. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is the first federal agency to take this type of meaningful action on neonics. The first agency to do more than just assess the impacts of neonics. So we were really pleased, and certainly a victory for Center for Food Safety and all the other organizations that have been involved with pressuring Fish and Wildlife Service to take this good step. And I think it sets a really good example for the White House as it moves forward with its task force that Tiffany just talked about, and as it starts coordinating between other federal agencies. They have this great leadership from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to look towards as to what a good approach would be, a precautionary approach, if you will, for dealing with this issue and taking action on neonics.
Thank you. Can you also talk about the new task force?
Sure. So the part of the White House presidential memorandum that was announced in June that Tiffany just talked about focuses on a pollinator task force, creating a pollinator task force to deal with the issues of pollinator declines. And I think one of the issues with this announcement is that we'd like to see a strong, significant step taken to actually deal with the impacts of pesticides. And as Tiffany mentioned, we really want to put pressure on the White House to take meaningful action. So it's critical that as this task force is convened and begins to really look into the issue of pollinator declines, that we ensure that the task force is focusing on the problems with pesticides and specifically neonicotinoids.
Thank you. Tiffany, what are some of the other activities that are going on to raise awareness about the need to save our bees?
Sure. So, Friends of the Earth feels there's a ripe opportunity right now for states, local governments, universities, and companies to make real improvements for our environment and for bees and other important species by securing commitments from these entities to stop using bee-harming pesticides. So especially this is extremely important in the face of very little action from EPA and Congress. So in the past year, we've seen a number of measures adopted to better protect pollinators: Eugene, Oregon, Spokane, Washington, and just recently Shorewood, Minnesota, as well as the states of Washington and Minnesota have all passed measures to better protect bees. And we've also seen some measures introduced in different states, including California, Maine, Maryland, New York, New Jersey, Alaska, and Vermont. So again, with little action from EPA and Congress, it's important that we work to pass key state and city resolutions to create healthy environments for pollinators and to move away from the use of bee-harming pesticides. So, unfortunately, there's something called state preemption laws, which make it very difficult to do this. So most folks aren't aware that there are these state preemption laws in place regarding pesticides. So preemption means the ability of one level of government to override the laws of a lower level of government. And the chemical industry lobbied really hard and passed legislation prohibiting municipalities from adopting local pesticide ordinances that are stricter than state policy for private property. And right now there's 43 states that have some form of state preemption laws, but there are 7 states that are not preempted, which include Alaska, Hawaii, Maine, Maryland, Nevada, South Dakota, and Utah. So what we're really encouraging people to do is, if they're in one of these states, work within their community to adopt a policy to protect bees by eliminating pesticide use. And then for folks that aren't in those states, really work in their communities to encourage retailers, their universities, or other entities to eliminate these pesticides from their store shelves, from their university grounds, or anywhere else that they might be found.
Thank you. Now, Larissa, you have some exciting news pertaining to a school in Vermont.
Yes, we were very excited last week, in the beginning of August, when Vermont Law School announced that they are going neonic-free. So they are the first higher education campus in the country to receive a neonic-free designation. And Center for Food Safety worked with them on that issue, and we were so excited for them to set this really great example for the rest of the country and for other higher education campuses to follow in their footsteps. And I'll add that I think all of these pockets, if you will, of neonic-free zones around the country are really great. And as Tiffany mentioned, we're seeing this growing interest to take action at the local level because of the absence of any meaningful action from our federal government, particularly the EPA. But even with these tricky legal obstacles such as preemption laws, we have seen a number of neighborhoods and communities work together just amongst themselves as private citizens to agree to stop using these chemicals in their own backyards. And Boulder, Colorado is a really great example. They created a bee-safe neighborhood, and essentially a number of residents in the community have agreed we're not going to be using these bee-toxic chemicals on our property, and therefore all of the habitat that we're planting is going to be healthier for the bees and our environment much safer for not just pollinators but also our children and our families. So I think it's a really good trend that's kind of spreading across the country.
I couldn't agree more. I think the efforts of both of your organizations are tremendous, and it's fantastic to see so many organizations, so many community groups, individual people, and just advocates that are really reaching out neighbor to neighbor, community to community, different public officials, what have you, really campaigning hard to do everything that we can within our power to protect our pollinators. After all, this is what we are leaving to the younger generations to basically fix, and this is not something that we really can fix. So the time is now to really do everything that we can, and especially with everything that Friends of the Earth, Center for Food Safety, and so many other organizations are doing, it's tremendous. And it's also showing the world that, yeah, here in the United States, maybe things are not moving as quickly as they have in Europe, but because of the advocacy of all these groups, change really is happening. So, Tiffany, Larissa, thank you so much for being on the show today. Tiffany, could you just share your website information? And Larissa, can you also do the same?
Sure. So folks can learn more and take action to save bees at beeaction.org. And thanks, June, for having us on the show and covering this important issue.
And
you're very welcome.
And to learn more at Center for Food Safety, visit our website, centerforfoodsafety.org, and visit our Pollinators and Pesticides issue tab. Thank you so much, June, for doing the show and covering this important issue.
Oh, it has been a pleasure having you both on the show, and I look forward to having you both come back very, very soon.
Look forward to being there.
And thank you so much. Oh, you're very welcome. And folks, thank you so much for tuning in. This has been June Stoyer with the Organic View Radio Show. Have a pleasant evening, folks.